There we go.
There we go. All right. Perfect. All right. I will call the Water and Sewer Board meeting to order. Brenda, if you'd start off with the roll call.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Board Member Boriski,
Present.
Board Member Ridley,
Present.
Vice Chair Habernick,
Present.
Board Member Roth,
Present.
Board Member Chair Moore,
Present.
Council Member Mayor Sierra,
Present.
Council Member Anderson,
Present.
Council Member Woodward,
Present.
Board Member Mercier,
Present.
and Board Member Freeman.
Present.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brenda. All right. Next, I'll like to start by welcoming our new board members. Caitlin, welcome back. And I'm sorry, is it Marjan?
Correct, it's Marjan.
Marjan, welcome. Thank you. Glad you
Thank you.
both here for another term. We look forward to having some fun together. Next order of business for approval of the minutes from our last meeting on January 11th. Can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say, let us know. All right, minutes have been approved. Next order of business is a public forum. Brenda, do we have anyone from the public to address us tonight?
No, we do not.
Thank you. All right. Then with that, we'll move on to new business and is it WIFIA loan agreements?
That's correct. Thank you, Chair. So Sarah Stone and I will be talking about the WIFIA loan agreement. So if you recall, this is a federal program that's administered by the EPA, and it's a low interest loan program. And way back in October of 2020 is when we submitted our original letter of intent to access this funding program. And I'm going to wait for Sarah to get the slides up. Can we go to the next slide?
Is it showing the slides? Okay, sorry.
Yep, no, we're good. And so this is it's a low interest loan program, and like I said, it's administered through the EPA, and it's got a few different things, which is one, the low interest rate. Two is the deferred repayment. So we can actually wait 5 years before we have to start paying this loan back. It's also kind of like, if you think of like a line of credit, we don't actually start paying interest on the money until we borrow it. So while we're approved up to a certain amount, we don't actually start paying on that amount until we actually pull it. And then the other thing is we can lengthen the time frame with which we pay it back, which helps us lower the debt service amount every year throughout that 35-year period. And in reality, this is one of those situations where, because the infrastructure that we'll be funding with this is some of that infrastructure will last 50, 60, 70 years. By funding it both with cash as well as a low interest loan program like this, essentially what you do is you don't put all the burden of paying for that right now on today's customers. It's something that lengthens out the payback during the period with which the infrastructure is actually still in its useful life. And so what this does is this is a way for us to essentially double our cash that we can use for the programs, the projects and the programs that we need to invest in, both in the water system and the South Platte Renew, predominantly Englewood's portion of South Platte Renew. The original loan amount was $45 million, is what we put in for the LOI. Through the course of the last 18 months, as we've been working through actually securing two loans, we're going to secure one loan for the water fund and one loan for the sewer fund. We've actually upped that amount by 33%. And the final amount that we're going for in terms of a loan amount is $60,500,000. And that came about basically because the EPA came to us and said, you know, across the country, we're seeing that construction costs are all over the place. And we're working with our applicants to up that loan amount to help them account for the fact that 2 or 3 years from now, who knows what the construction industry is going to do. So that's really helped us finalize this loan amount. And so if you think about that 60 million, that covers 49% of project costs, which means the cash we need to come up with, which would be 60 million, would be the other 51%, thereby allowing us to, in the water and the wastewater fund, address $120 million worth of projects over the next 7 years. And so that gets us caught up on a lot of things that are somewhat deferred maintenance. Next slide. So here's some examples of what we're looking at. So we've talked about pump station improvements. We've talked about our flat rate metering, potentially going to a full AMI system, automated meter infrastructure. The Allen treatment plant it's been quite a while since we've made some upgrades, and we've got a number of necessary upgrades. The lead service line replacement program is a huge program that we don't quite have our arms around in terms of how much it's going to cost. We think it could cost upwards of $80 million. And we don't have necessarily that fully funded right now. Additionally, there's the South Platte Renew treatment process upgrades. So there's I believe it's 120 million over the next 10 years that or 140 million over the next 10 years that is required investment in South Platte Renew. So that's 50-50 between Englewood and Littleton. And so all of this low interest funding allows us to double that money to make those investments. I think the real one of the other things that's really actually an advantage to us going through this process for the last 18 months is the infrastructure money that everybody's talking about from the latest infrastructure bill. A lot of that money is going to come down. It's going to be administered by the federal government, largely by the EPA through the state revolving fund. And because we've gone through this whole process with the EPA, it actually sets us up in a better situation to actually access that money more quickly. So it's just a secondary benefit to going through this process and securing these loans. So as far as the actual loans themselves, I'm going to turn that over to Sarah, because we're at the point now where we're finalizing the documents and ready to close the loans in the next couple months.
Sure. Thank you, Peter. So we have been working with the EPA since really August, after we submitted our application process. Through the application process, we've gone through and defined the projects, really narrowed down on those costs, and then got down to that final loan amount of $60,500,000. Split between the water and sewer enterprise funds. So when we submitted our application, one of the things we needed to do, and it was done in September, was an initial meeting with the WIFIA representatives to really talk about, okay, what are these key terms that we want to see in our loan? That's the nice thing about the WIFIA program, is there's some flexibility that we can use our existing loan agreements or other base documents as the driver for our key business terms that we want to include in our loan. So we went in our application with basically the full suite of projects that were on the last slide, the water and sewer, as kind of one big submittal package. And then when we talked with WIFIA, last summer and fall, we asked, hey, we can split that into 2 separate loans, one for the water and one for the sewer. And they were agreeable to that, which is great, because we submitted a application fee of $100,000. And so with that, we were able to get the 2 loans. We will lock the interest rate at loan closing. So the loan closing is likely in April. At that point in time, we lock in that interest rate for that full 40-year period. So as Peter mentioned, we get to defer our initial principal repayment for 5 years after basically substantial completion. So in the loan document currently, that date is August 1st, 2030 is when we would start repaying the WIFIA loan. And that repayment amount is dependent on the amount of money that we draw down during the next 5-year period. Net revenues are used from each enterprise fund to secure the pledge to the loan. And the WIFIA loan is equal to any equal in parity to any current and future lien obligations for each one of those funds. And that's pretty typical. They do have a statement in the loan agreement asking that we just let them know if we are planning on taking out other loan obligations. Typically, that's a pretty easy process. We would just keep them informed of what we're considering for financing that other 51% of these projects. The annual rate increases that we've modeled to date support the debt service coverage that's required in the loan documents. We have requested a debt service coverage ratio of 1.1. They're currently considering that. Their initial debt service coverage ratio proposed to us was 1.2. I don't think it'll be that high. And my guess is it'll be somewhere in between. We will have federal compliance and reporting obligations. So that's like Davis-Bacon wage rates. We'll have some reporting under the American Iron and Steel Act, and then equal opportunity employer provisions that we'll just include and send documentation to WIFIA as they request or as to the EPA. And then finally, we will be required to keep an O&M reserve fund, 3 months worth of operating costs. We already hold that within the water and sewer funds. We actually have modeled in our financial modeling to increase that up to 6 months through this the time period that we would be paying off this loan. So the financial implications are water loan principal is estimated to be $38,700,000, and then our sewer loan principal is estimated to be $21,800,000. That includes all the projects that we put in our application package, as well as the anticipated loan closing costs of about $500,000, kind of split proportionally between the water and sewer fund loans. And then there's an annual operating and annual construction period servicing fee, and that's for each loan. So it's $8,000 through the life of the loan for the operating service fee, and then the construction period. So that period between now and 2026, that substantial completion, we'd pay an annual fee of $11,000. So this is our timeline for our loan agreement approval. So we're before the Water Sewer Board tonight. We are scheduled to be in front of council at the study session on February 28th. We would then have a first reading of the ordinance March 7th, or each ordinance, an ordinance for the water enterprise fund loan agreement, and then an ordinance for the sewer fund agreement. And then the second reading would be March 21st. And then following that month-long ordinance publication period, we would then be able to execute the loan anytime after that. So kind of estimated as March or as April 21st. And then project delivery is anytime now. We are actually working on projects that are have WIFIA eligible costs. We are anticipating we'll submit a invoice package as soon as the loan closes for any funds expended this year up through the end of March. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Sarah? I'll kick it off with one. Sarah, I'm not sure if you said, but you said the interest rate gets locked in at close, so to speak. What's the basis? And like, if it were happening today, what would that rate be?
Sure. So I looked today, and it's based on the federal rate, and for it looks at 30 years on the curve, and it would be about 2.2%. I've seen it fluctuate between this, 2% and 2.2 over the last couple months. I did speak with our EPA underwriter, and he said that it's usually about a baseline of 2% recently. That's kind of how it's been trending. He also said that there is talk of the Fed increasing rates this year, and that's likely already been priced into these interest rates.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I don't see any hands up, but does anyone have any I'm sorry, does someone speak?
Yeah, can I just add to that? So
Yeah.
that's one consideration that we're potentially going to bring to council is there is the opportunity to do an emergency adoption at the end of the second reading. And so what we're going to do is when we're presenting that second adoption, the second reading is trend what the interest rate has been. Because if it is trending up, and if it's 30 days of that waiting period just makes our interest rate go up because we're waiting, we're going to look at that as a potential option to offer council. We haven't decided yet because I know that's not something we want to do often, but this might be one of those situations where it warrants that, at which point then we close in March.
Yeah, that sounds like a very prudent move from my perspective, for whatever that's worth. Very good, thank you. No hands are raised. Are there any any other questions? All right. And seeing no questions, if we could, let me get rid of, if we could get a motion to recommend that City Council approve by ordinance WIFIA loan agreements with the EPA for funding in the water fund for up to, took it away, 38.7 million. And then for the sewer fund up to 21.8 million. Could I get such a motion?
I move.
Could I get a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Wonderful, thank you very much. All right, next up, utility locating and marking contract. Angela.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm going to share my screen. Good evening, Water Sewer Board members, City Council members, and the Mayor. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So I'm going to be presenting our utility locating and marketing services. All right, so the utility locating actually includes locating water, sewer, and storm sewer lines, and we're actually required by state statute to do that. Our average annual volume includes about 8,000 routine locate requests and about 600 emergency requests. We issued an RFP late last year and selected USIC as the contractor, and we received 2 other bids, one from Utilio and Diversified Underground. The table presents the normal locate fee on a per ticket basis, the emergency locate fee also on a per ticket basis, and then the approximate total cost, assuming those 8,000 routine tickets and the 600 emergency locates. USIC came in as the lowest total bidder by quite a bit. Oops, let me go back. And so that is, and they also prepared a very nice statement of qualifications, and that is our recommendation to proceed with utility locating. Are there any questions?
Jim, go ahead. I see your hand.
You're on mute, Jim.
There we
You're still on mute, Jim.
All right.
I'm
There we go.
sorry. Is this locating for the city or for city utilities or for the resident?
So it is for all city utilities.
Okay, So this isn't a resident expense if they wanted to know what on their property or something.
No, that is kind of a separate service that's provided through our utility billing, where they would call to have something located. Typically, it's a meter pit or their service line, so that's stuff that we would do in house.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Very good. Marjan, did you have a question?
Yes,
comment?
I was wondering what differentiates these companies for their qualifications, as well as the difference in such a price range that causes that these companies, one has 15 versus 30.
We'll go back to that one. So I wouldn't necessarily be able to speak as to why they're different. They all provide different unit costs. It's also a typical thing for contractors to provide a different hourly rate. So I am not exactly sure why the rates are so different. Their qualifications were all pretty similar. They were all qualified to do the work. They all had pretty good references whenever we checked into them. So the real differentiator was the cost in this issue, or sorry, for this particular service.
So it doesn't take a skilled person to do the job. They're all qualified. Is that the length of the time they have performed this kind of services identifies?
So they're all qualified, and it does take a certain level of skill in order to perform locates. So one of the things that we had written into the RFP was kind of how they perform the locates. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with the witching sticks from back in the day, that that's how we would find water. But there's definite it is a bit of a science to it in order to do that. So it's not just a random person that says, yeah, I'll be able to find your storm sewer, or I'll be able to find your water utility or water or sewer. They submitted qualifications along with cost.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you educating me with that.
Sure.
Thanks.
Angela, this is John, just curiosity, are any of these three our current provider?
No, that's a great question, and thank you. I meant to kick that off with the presentation. So we currently have a one person who is actually performing the utility locating, and when that person is sick or they take a vacation, we have to fill in, and so we've been actually using several people to perform this service. So instead of just one person, it actually is somewhere between 1.5 to 2 people that have been performing the service. So in order to allow efficient use of our full-time employees, contracting this service out makes a lot of sense.
I'll just add to that. This is part of the larger analysis we're doing on what we do in-house versus what we contract out. There's a number of programmatic operations that we should be doing that we currently don't do on a more routine basis, and so it's trying to get those programs in place so they're more predictable. And this is one of those instances where we can easily carve something out. There's a subset of companies that this is all they've done and this is all they do. They're experts at it, which then frees up our internal staff to be utilized for in-house related programs that may take more specific knowledge of the city of Englewood or specific experience relative to the city of Englewood. We're doing this pretty much across the board with all the programs that we have in utilities to get to a point where we're addressing those programs that we identified in the master plan a couple of years ago to really get on top of that. We can't go and hire 30 people in-house to do that. So we look at a blend of staff and contracted out resources.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions? All right, then can I get a motion to recommend that City Council approve by motion a contract for services with USIC Locating Services LLC to provide utility locating and marking services in the amount of $144,600 with an additional 10% staff managed contingency of $14,460 for a total project authorization of $159,060.
So moved.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Next up is a global underground change order.
All right, so you all may remember whenever we came to the board to ask for authorization, or I guess the similar motion to recommend to city council the, actually, sorry, let me back up a second. We have two contractors that were under contract in 2021 to assist us with emergency water main repairs. And we got to the end of one of the contracts for the emergency repairs. And we had this major repair that happened between Christmas and New Year's before we were able to put in place the contracts for 2022 to have contractors repair our water lines whenever they break. And the repair actually was in front of the Swedish hospital, and that single repair cost $21,000. It was a major repair whenever the main the main burst. It didn't just have a leak, and so it helped us a little bit with self-excavating, and there was extensive pavement replacement that needed to be performed. So that single break actually put us well over what the final amount was that was left in the contract, even after a change order that we put in place to help out with bridging that gap in between the month of December and then whenever the new contractors came on board in January. So the change order amount that we're requesting is $12,524.91, and that will actually close out the contract for Global Underground for 2021.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing no hands raised, I'd like to ask for a motion to recommend that City Council approve by motion a second change order with Global Underground to the 2021 purchase order in the amount of $12,524.91 for a total purchase order authorization of $110,524.91. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. All any further discussion? All right, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Sorry, make sure that, was there anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. We don't have any old business tonight, so we'll move on to staff's choice, starting with a backflow prevention and cross-connection control update.
Yeah, so we'll just do a couple updates that we've been giving the board every month now. And Angela will just give us a quick update on where we're at in backflow and cross connection. We've come a long way on this, and it's Angela and her staff and engineering staff, as well as billing staff, to get us to the point where we're finally almost there. And so I'll let Angela give an update, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. So we are sitting pretty at 99%. We have 3 outstanding backflow devices that have yet to be tested, and they all have a plan. 2 of them are actually going to be tested within the next 2 weeks, and 1 is waiting on parts. We've actually been coordinating with that company for the schedule that they have to complete those repairs. We're sitting good, in a good state with our 2021 backflow prevention program. So we don't anticipate any issues whenever we prepare our report this May for 2021. We are doing our best to get everything sorted out so that we are in a good position for 2022. We're working closely with the utility billings department to get notices sent out the beginning of summer in order to kick off the backflow compliance testing a little bit sooner and get everyone on a similar schedule. So there will be a lot of communication that goes out to the public, and we will be sure to keep in touch with you to let you know when that's happening so that we can hopefully minimize customer frustration with them saying, I just completed this in December and now you're asking me to do it again in January. But the goal is to get everyone on the exact same schedule instead of having a rolling, some people are in February and some people are in November. We're also doing a system-wide resurvey of the cross-connection control, and we're working very closely with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment in order to make sure that we have correct and current documentation. We are going to be hiring an outside firm in order to help us achieve that goal so that we can get the surveys performed, and then things should be a little bit easier in 2023.
Just to add to that, this is the program where, as we talked in November and December, we were talking about shutting off several businesses, and through the nonstop effort of staff and constant communication, sometimes 4 and 5 and 6 communications with these businesses, we got down to the point where there was potentially 2. And once we printed up the red tags and said, we're going to shut you off next week, all of a sudden they had a plan in place. So we didn't actually have to shut anybody off, which I think is a tremendous success compared to where we were in November as we were facing the number of places that were out of compliance. So it's really a testament to the staff's work on this.
Any questions, comments? I'll just say, yeah, this is an amazing result because the deadline was end of March, right?
Yes, so we had until March to get a couple of the stragglers, but we were in compliance as of the end of December. And it's an interesting thing with the irrigation devices. So the irrigation, anything that's hooked to an irrigation system doesn't actually count towards that ratio. So the chances of ever getting to 100% may not actually be realistic, but that 99% is very good. And we are in compliance with the state.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Good work.
Thank you.
Good perseverance. Very good. Okay. Water shutoff moratorium.
Sure.
So this will be Sarah. We'll be providing an update on where we're at on ending our moratorium on shutoffs and suspensions.
I'll just pop up a quick slide here with some of the latest data. So as of today, we are down about 15% from the number of accounts that have an outstanding balance. So currently there's about 391 accounts with a total of 290,000 outstanding. So that's a reduction about 70 accounts from this time a month ago. I think I said December, I meant January. So in the last month, there's been a reduction of 70 accounts. Our communication has been working. 49 customers have called and set up payment arrangements. 32 of those have been set up in the last month. So that means that customers are, given a certain amount that they pay per month in order to prevent a shut off for non-payment. So they may still have an outstanding balance, but as long as they keep current with that arrangement, then they can continue to pay, and we would not shut them off. The low income housing water assistance program is funds that were made available to states to administer for overdue utility bills through the COVID relief bill last year. So we've had since November 1st, that program opened up. We've paid for 13, or that program has paid for 13 customers for a total of $6,515 in overdue bills. So this next week, we will be starting with Q1 red tags. So Q1 is this area in the city. Those are scheduled to get red tags early next week, and then shutoffs would start on February 24th. So February 24th is a Thursday. We will not shut off on Friday because we are saying that it would take 24 hours to reinstate water service. So if water is shut off on Thursday and payments are made on Thursday, we would then send field staff out on Friday to turn those accounts back on. As of right now, each quadrant has about double the typical amount seen, back before we suspended shutoffs that are outstanding. So typically in each quadrant, there were about 60 accounts each billing period, and that's back when it was quarterly billing. So at the time, 60 accounts were overdue in that quarter. And that would take, the number of people to go and shut off those accounts. So right now it's about double in each of those quadrants. So we're not anticipating that we'll be able to shut everyone off in Q1 that hasn't paid on the 24th. So it will kind of be a process here as we work through it this first month of reinstating shutoffs. I'm happy to take any questions about that.
Don't see any hand raised. I'm curious, once you get started, if it entices others to fix things, but I don't know that there's much, if it gets out, if the word gets out, so to speak. So hopefully these numbers drop for some reason, but unfortunately it looks like we going in with still a number of people that be interesting just to see how this plays out. I hope it works out all right.
Yeah, and just a little anecdotal data. So last Monday, was the last day of January. The billing staff got twice the volume of calls that they typically get. So people are certainly talking about it and making arrangements to pay their bills. We just said February in all of our communications. So now, it's clearer that those dates are a little bit later in February. So we're still anticipating that this will get better as, we're continuing to get calls from customers.
Wonderful.
The other thing to add to this is that all a customer has to do is call us and we'll work with them on payment arrangements. We'll get them connected up to all these programs. We'll get them resources if they need them. And so it's really a matter of it's them contacting us and then we'll work with them. But right now when you've got 391 accounts that aren't really contacting us, it becomes you incrementally progress through incentive to contact, and ultimately the incentive is when the water gets shut off.
Yeah, and Pieter, remind me, unlike the other group where you guys are able to target the individuals, do these 391 people know, or is there still a chance they're not paying attention to their water bills and don't understand this is about to happen?
We have done all kinds of notifications, both in the bill itself. We've done it through social media. We put it on a website. We put out a separate mailing. We have been notifying since basically about October that this was coming to give people advance notice of it. And so it could really be that last notification is when they get a red tag on their door and it says your water is going to be shut off. So we anticipate once those go out, we'll definitely see some response.
And I'll just add to that, Pieter, throughout this entire moratorium on shutoffs, we have been placing notices on people's door, and it's in lieu of red tags. So that every single month, someone has gone out, put a notice on these customers' door saying your bill is overdue. So it's not a red tag, it's just an in lieu of red tag notice.
So Sarah, that's very helpful. So these individuals do know.
Correct.
Unless the tag flew off the door, it'd be hard to imagine they don't know at this point. So that's good. Okay.
Yeah, it should be no surprise. And actually, one of the things that we did here was that some people made the business decision to not pay the bill because there was no penalty for not paying the bill. And then as soon as we said there's going to be a penalty, they paid off their bill. So it's one of the outcomes of this process, but it's really designed to help people who are struggling, but you can't address everything, I guess.
Yeah. Let's see, a couple of hands raised. Joe and then Drevis.
Thanks, John. I guess my question is kind of more long-term. Is moving to monthly billing going to require more work on staff to go out and put out red tags on these houses in the future, or since you don't have to do it, do you have to reevaluate every month, or is that something you're still going to be doing on a similar basis?
So we'll still be doing it similarly to how we're doing it now. Actually,
Yeah,
we're
it just
hoping that
froze.
volume.
So
Can you hear us okay?
okay, I think I can hear you now. Sorry.
Okay, sure. So it's a similar process to basically what we've been doing all along since we've gone to monthly billing. So, one person goes out and puts these tags on, and so on the red tag day, 5 days before the shut off, that person would go out and put all those red tags out. We're anticipating that this number is going to go down. So while quadrant 1 has 130 customers approximately with overdue bills right now, my guess is that'll drop in half by the, as we start the shut off process. Typically it was about 60 customers each billing cycle. So at the time it was, in the quarterly billing. I actually think monthly is an easier way for customers to keep track of paying their bills.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So it is more, we're putting out more red tags because we're increasing the frequency by, by 3. And so it is something that we're able to absorb in our current workload. And frankly, I think to Sarah's last point there, a quarterly amount that you're behind on versus a monthly amount that you're behind on is easier to address. So even though it's a little bit more work on the city side, we think it helps our customers from just keeping up with their bill.
It's good. Thank you.
Travis?
Yeah, just make sure I've got all right. I have a question, and it's just sort of a, how does this work kind of question. My husband and I noticed a neighbor's house had been tagged, and we actually became concerned because their house was wide open and nobody was there. And it appears that they moved out and that I don't know who the owner is, but they're selling it. How do you get paid for that amount, which obviously has gone months without being paid? Does that come out of the sale? Do you guys put a lien on the house? What do you do?
So if it's an Inside City customer, we do not put a lien on it, but there is a final bill. And then that goes to the title company when the house is for sale, and at closing, that bill will be paid.
Okay, because it wasn't the property owner that asked me, but I thought I should probably know the answer to that so I could pass along when it happens.
Sure.
So thank you.
Any other questions? All right, don't see any more. Before we wrap, is there any other issue that anyone would like to raise? And then I think we're good.
Hey, John, actually, do you mind if I ask a question?
No, please jump in.
Actually, so Peter, I was just wondering, do we have an update on the city ditch relocation agreements? I know that we tabled it or we pushed it back. Just wondering what the status of that is.
Sure. So on the city ditch, so we're still moving forward with that. One of the things that we did was we actually pulled it out of the WIFIA suite of packages, this suite of projects. And so what that did is that removed the federal trigger, because what we didn't want to have happen was we didn't want to have any issue around city ditch jeopardize the remaining money that we were going after for WIFIA. So we pulled that out, which then eliminates the federal NEPA trigger for historic preservation. We've subsequently met with both the historic preservation groups at Englewood and with Littleton, and got their input on what their concerns are, and committed to working with them through the process. So as we start to develop solutions for this project, for the city ditch, we will bring them in and show them, work with them on alternatives, and then cost those alternatives. One of the groups from Littleton provided us some information on potential grant funding sources that they've apparently accessed before. And I said, that's great. That's the kind of thing that if we are going to need to spend more money to preserve the historic nature of the ditch outside of the city of Englewood, that would likely fall on on the community outside of Englewood. And so I think right now we've got a good working relationship between the two historic preservation societies and us as it relates to advancing the project. As far as the project itself, we're about to issue an RFP for the conceptual phase of the project, which is basically alignment and right of way and environmental impacts and things like that. And so I would anticipate that, Steve, that'll go out second quarter this year. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Peter.
And so if that goes out second quarter, then it'll likely be conceptual through the end of the year. Then we'll get into design. We might use some form of alternative delivery to design and construct at the same time, some kind of design build maybe. If we do design bid build, that would be, probably a 9-month design process followed by a year-long construction process. We got to consider the time when the ditch is on and the ditch is off, so it might follow over 2 years. Our goal in this is in the next 3 years that we've got the ditch piped.
So Peter, I think I may be confused. I think I may have been asking more about the easement agreement
shoot.
Yeah, so that's what I'm more, because I thought that there was going to be like a quicker time frame to bring that back. And I haven't seen this. I just wondered if I missed a meeting, or just seems like it may be still in talks.
My apologies. Well, now you got an update on the historic.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I appreciate the other update on the city ditch.
Actually, I'm going to turn the other update over to Steve because I know he has been working with the county on that. I apologize for missing that.
Sure. So the Wednesday after our last board meeting, I reached out to our contact at the Army Corps and discussed with him our concerns and how we might adjust or what type of flexibility there is in those easement agreement terms. And he did mention that there are circumstances where that 25-year term doesn't apply. And he was mentioning roadways. And so knowing that there are circumstances where they are willing to remove that 25-year, that might be an opportunity. Following that discussion with the Army Corps, I reached out to our RFP was at our last meeting. I thought he had some pretty good ideas of ways that we could negotiate with work with the Army Corps that we can remove that restriction. One of those is, which I think is a really good idea, is could we preserve the same rights that we have on the current easement in this new location? Both of the sites are within the easement area. And he was also going to work on some language, or I'd asked him to work on proposed language that we could propose either to Army Corps or agreement language that we could work with Douglas County. So haven't heard anything back from them. As soon as we do, we'll be happy to report that back to the board.
Thank you, Steve.
Great. Marjan, you had your hand up?
Yes, sir. I just was wondering, as far as the loan that we're getting from EPA, what dictates that it is norm? Like, I can't. I believe you said it was 2.2%, and that was the baseline. That was that something that we request from them, or is that something? What is considered norm? Where does norm comes from?
So that's kind of where the federal funds rate has been over the last several years, around this 2%. So as rates fluctuate, that's priced into those long-term interest rates. So I guess maybe it's not norm, but normal for this time period that we're in and considering the closing on the loan.
So in the timetable that you had at starting February 8th that you're presenting this, and it goes all the way to March 1st, correct? So, and during this time frame, I mean, what are our flexibility and choices that we could, when do we know that, what are our options? Seems like we don't have, I mean, and I apologize for my ignorance and lack of understanding of how this process works. And so I'm trying to learn so that way we could gonna be asking proper questions about it. So when do we know? I mean, do we just, they just give us a timetable, here it is, and this is it? You're stuck with this? Is it determined by the federal bank decides how much money comes? Is this related to the taxpayers' money? Or do we just lay down, okay, now our option is this year is 2.2, and then we're stuck, and then if we don't like it, what are our options? I just fail to see that how this process has any kind of we have a choice in it. I just like to see what are our choices, what are our flexibility and negotiation abilities, and how can we make that easier for the Englewood or choices that we might have.
Sure. So I'll answer directly on the WIFIA process, and Peter, if you want to add anything, feel free. So WIFIA dictates what they use for the interest rate. They tie it to the federal funds rate. And so the federal funds rate is set daily. We can go in and take a look at it. We use, it actually uses for the WIFIA fund, when we lock in that rate, it uses an average repayment period of the 30 years or 35 years. And so we can take a look at that curve, that federal funds curve interest rate, and pull the interest rate from that. So when I looked at it today, I think it's updated every night and then available first thing in the morning. It was at 2.2%. So it's really dictated by, that's the rate WIFIA uses for their program.
That's very helpful. Thank you for explaining that. I'll go look at them. Thank you.
Kate, I believe your hand is raised.
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to backtrack for a minute to the mayor's question for an update regarding the easement, and just to build on what Steve was saying. The board previously asked me to consider the issue of the potential abandonment, of whether there's potential risk of abandoning the rights to the easement if the ditch is moved and if the pipeline is moved. And I did want to just let the board know that I did do some brief research on that, and obviously I would do more if that is going to be pursued further, but I did confirm that there is the possibility that such an argument can be made. I'm not saying that it would necessarily be a successful argument that there's been abandonment, but there is a potential risk of that. So I just wanted to provide that update to the board.
Thank you. Sounds like we continue to have something to make sure we fix before we move forward. So cool. Any other questions or comments? Right, I see no other hands raised. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Yep.